Hey there friends, Dave Paulides, Canam Missing Project Copyrighted Edition for our video channel. Thanks for being here. It's a missing person segment. But before I get going into that, everyone knows we did 20 classes on Bigfoot. And we just finished with the Bigfoot final. 50 questions. It's kind of fun. But in the meantime, somebody even had more fun than me. They sent me this. The Bigfoot 101 class. Very nice. Very nice. Well done. Thank you very much. And then a person named JT sent me another package with a whole bunch of things in it. And I got it, including a series of CDs on Dane Cook to listen to. So thank you for all your thoughts, you guys, and really, really appreciate it. Angie and I go through them all the time and talk about how kind you people are. And somebody asked the other day, hey Dave, how long does it take to put these things together? You know, it takes a while. And I learned a long time ago, the more time you put into it, the better off it becomes. And I always try to look for interesting letters, interesting stories. In the last 4 months, we've been on a big rampage for to just kind of pick up the research again. We kind of stalled for a while, but we're back. The stories you're hearing today, never been heard before, brand new. And it's just a lot of archival search to get to the locations where little tiny details, maybe the headline of the story, you know, poor person disappears in small town. And then you read it and you figure out, wow, it's a missing 411 story. But it's those small headlines that really come out with some of the best stories. The two stories today, very odd, very odd. I hear about stories all the time. I've never heard about these two. So, and then the letters. Letters are good today. Let's get to them. He said, first writer says, hey Dave, elk hunters use their sixth sense to determine where to hunt each day. It works surprisingly well for me and others I know too. Good elk hunters learn to trust their gut instincts on where to search for game. Lately, I've used my sixth sense when applying for units or hunting regions to draw licenses. Arizona has more hunters than elk, so it comes down to a random draw lottery process. Each hunter has two choices, and you must determine the spots that will be overlooked by other hunters, thereby giving you a better chance to draw a tag. Finding that hidden gem location, so to speak, like a light bulb going off in the head. I've come up with some creative ideas and have been drawing good tags. Last November I harvested a huge mule deer buck in southern Arizona. This year I drew a coveted elk tag. The location I will be hunting is located in a cluster zone of missing people near Prescott, Arizona. Thinking back, I remembered seeing my first UFO on my deer hunting trip last fall in a different cluster zone near Safford, Arizona. Could evil spirits be affecting hunters' sixth sense by tricking them into dangerous cluster zones? That's what it feels like to me right now. Evil spirits driving hunters into the cluster zones and hoping something else will finish them off perhaps, like the shimmering man thing. Thank you for opening my eyes to the dangers of the wilderness. Appreciate it. Well, when you said driving hunters to the cluster zones, it sounds like this man hadn't watched our movie, Missing 411, the UFO Connection. I don't necessarily think they're driving the hunters, but didn't we show in the movie that they're actually doing some hunting there themselves? Yeah. I mean, it was pretty obvious that they were getting some game themselves. So I don't necessarily think that they were looking just for hunters, but they were doing a little march for their own. So I don't know about that, what he said. Possible, I guess. Hey Dave, I'm a 32-year-old nuclear electrician supervisor living in Western Washington. This is an interesting letter. My friends and I spend almost every weekend camping in the Olympic Mountains of Washington State to watch sunset and sunrise. Those are some really strange mountains, let me tell you. Unfortunately, trees obstruct most views here, so I use Google Earth and topographic maps to find logged areas at elevation in or near the mountains. This is where I feel closest to God. I've never had any UFO experiences besides those orbs of unknown origin. Sir, there have been 3 times in 2022 that I've had difficulty rationalizing what I saw. This area has substantial military presence, so I am open to military explanation. But intuition tells my friends and me there's more to this. Also, I have multiple pictures and videos taken of these events, but in pitch black, there's not much of a camera that I can use that works. Hardly ever is going to convince someone who was not there, so I hesitate to share, and I've deleted most of them because of the lackluster detail. On the 11th of February 2022, without alcohol or drugs, 3 of my friends and I were camping at the end of a service road in Mason County, portion of the Olympic Mountains. We named this spot Molehill 1, 1,200 foot in elevation. It is on a logged hill at the eastern edge of the Olympic Mountains. As the crow flies, this location is about 1.5 miles west of the Hood Canal waterway. This camping spot is on the west side, facing the hill with less wind. And from the campfire, we have a view into the interior of the Olympics. From our perspective, the center just disappeared beside Mount Washington, which is 10.25 miles away. It had not set on the horizon yet. The sky was still bright blue, no clouds, no stars. We were all around the campfire, and I saw a brilliant white orb of light appear. It slowly ascended vertically without a finger width above the mountain and the hovered horizon. And it hovered stationary. With my 10x binoculars, we all took turns examining the object as it was a massive drone, to assess if it was a massive drone. We could not see any fuselage or structure to the orb. It was a brilliant white light that dissipated from the center. We all remarked that it was much bigger than any retail drone, especially since it was so far away. In the binoculars, you could fit a tree on the neighboring hillside in the orb, but the lack of identifiable structure and lacking blinking lights made us believe the orb was not a drone or other typical aircraft. The object traveled exceptionally slowly. After ascending vertically, it changed direction and went down the right side of the mountain. The orb was the brightest thing in the sky and was visible for 3 hours till it disappeared behind another hill. It is important to note the travel path of the orb was different than the path of the stars in the sky caused by the Earth's rotation. Remember in this movie, husband and wife were sitting on the edge of a lake watching an orb fly around a mountain? Kind of what this reminds me of. Sir, to me, this is a critical piece of information. If we had not identified the object in daylight, since it moves so slowly, we could have easily never noticed it. This makes me wonder how many things we can't see routinely in the sky over forests because the trees obstruct the view, or if we can see it, we don't notice it because it's moving so slowly. Let's think about this. If something's flying high in the sky, then many more people on the ground can see it. You put the object at treetop levels, and only the people immediately in the vicinity around it could see it, because if it's on the treetops, then it's protected by the other trees in the area, and the other offers and inhibits the view from people outside that perimeter. So when objects don't want to be seen, they stay closer to the ground. Now that we are hyper aware of objects in the sky, at around 10 o'clock, we noticed another orb ascending very close to us. Again, it was a brilliant white ball of light. It appeared to climb very slowly, almost directly over the hill. It was just beyond the eastern slope. We watched it for about 2 hours until we went to sleep. With the 10x binoculars, we could see that the orb was actually 3 individual lights arranged in a small triangle. It didn't look big, but it was larger and more luminescent than the Northern Star. It appeared to be hovering stationary at first glance, but when we focused on it, we noticed it was wiggling around in a bizarre, almost unnoticeable tiny movements. It would drift slowly around in a small area around us. There were no sounds from the object, no blinking lights, no rushing air, no feelings of dread or fear. It was almost silly and whimsical. We went to sleep without answers and with the orb still in the sky. I woke up an hour and a half before sunrise to start the fire and make coffee. The orb was still there, but now just to the north of us. After everyone awoke, we talked about it, poured our coffees, and walked to the east side of the molehill to watch the first light. In this little cluster of camping spots, the view towards the east is breathtaking for sunrise. You can see everything between the Olympics, Cascade ranges from Canada to Oregon, and Mount Rainier towers over the landscape like a jewel. Over the next 3 to 4 hours, we watched the orb travel across the Hood Canal and toward Rainier. It traveled exceptionally slowly, was the brightest thing in the sky. We stayed and watched the orb after the sun had completely arisen. Even though no stars were visible and it was broad daylight, we could still see the orb, or just our eyes as it traveled east towards Rainier and rose higher in the atmosphere. Let me tell you, that is a very, very unusual sighting right there. Orbs do not usually stay around that long. And in fact, that may be the only time I've ever heard that. To think that you slept through the night, got up and it was still there in daylight, very odd. Second experience. Again, no alcohol, no drugs. My best friend and I were camping at Molehill 3, 1800 elevation. This time we saw 4 separate events starting at around 10 a.m. First 3 orbs appeared in a rigid triangle and modulated on an axis. Second, multiple orbs appeared near the base of Green Mountain and then shot over the first line of tree towards the Hood Canal. Once they passed the tree line, they changed direction, shot down towards the water, and then disappeared. There was no noticeable impact on the water. Third, a bright light on the shoreline appeared and never moved. There was no house in that area, and there's no light in that area previously or since. The light remained until we went to sleep. Looking through 10x binoculars, I saw no evidence of people or objects other than the bright light. The weird part was an orb would fade into existence 1,000 feet above that shoreline, and after many minutes it would dissolve out of existence. The orb in the sky would disappear and reappear multiple times but never move. And finally, the weirdest event of the night. Around 11 to 1 a.m., across the Hood Canal in the woods above a small community called Holly, we saw something that frustrates me today. According to Google Earth, the object appeared about 4 miles east of our camping spot. This section of Mason County has sparsely populated housing near lakes and no visible lights at night. Every time we camp, that section of the woods is just dark. A lot of area is DNR land and off-road trails. My friend and I noticed 2 barely visible red dots above the tree line and 2 green dots below the red dots at the tree line. Looking through the 10x binoculars, it looked like 4 dim floating dots. They were tiny and separate from each other, not connected by a fuselage. However, my friend and I felt that the green lights were somehow related to the corresponding red light. Almost like a red light was scanning the forest for the green light, with the green light. The red dots with the green dots below would travel at considerable distance of the forest from east to west and north to south and back. They would hover in certain areas longer than others. They would move quickly for the amount of space traveled, way faster than an off-road vehicle. And they could never dream of going. The movement did not feel random, it felt controlled. According to Google Earth, the estimated distance between those is 8 miles long and 2.5 miles wide. That's a conservative estimate to ensure I'm not exaggerating. When I look at the map, I think it was probably more like 10 miles by 5 miles. Paul and I have discussed that what it looked like, it covered most of the visible land in that area. This is where it gets weird. So randomly, the red tiny dots would ignite into a big ball of flames. I didn't know how to describe it any other way. Whether it was flames is beyond the point. Imagine a tiny red dot floating above the trees, 4 miles away, barely visible to the naked eye. Now imagine that little red dot suddenly engulfed in a sizable orb-shaped orangish fireball. That's what we witnessed. Each red dot would ignite independently of the other at different times and stay lit for 5 to 10 seconds. The two red dots always remained near each other as they traveled. We did not notice a consistent period to the fireball ignition. As far as we know, the green light stayed the same and followed the red dots through the tree line. The fireball weirdness continued for an hour or two until we went to bed. The following day there were no lights and no signs anything abnormal. This one felt controlled by intelligence, like it had objects and intent. The answer could be military. I honestly have no idea. The ball of orange flames lightning makes me curious. It is so abnormal. The one thing I can tell you is that this night was unique. The next 2 nights we were there and nothing strange happened. Think about this. Think about how many forest fires we have and there's no known source of ignition. Well, there's a source of possible ignition. Maybe. Third experience. September 2nd, 2022, I threw a work party to celebrate my crew's accomplishments for the year. We were all drinking, standing around. The location was Camping Hill Mole 2, 1200 elevation. About 1 to 2 a.m. we were drinking around the campfire. My friend's wife and I noticed 2 massive funnels of bright white light connecting a cloud layer that rolled in after sunset 2 distant ridges away. First ridge was 2.5 miles south, the second was 2 miles further. These light funnels were extraordinarily bright and distinctive in shape, like a large cylinder with a bevel at each end. The bevel curved outward, covering a very large area of clouds and ridgeline. I'm still trying to understand because it moves the likelihood of a typical flashlight. For example, a floodlight would have a single point of origin for the light, but these didn't. Instead, they were massive and turned on and off very quickly. Each ridgeline ignited at different times, almost like a call response, sometimes overlapping. I wasn't counting, but it happened approximately 10 times over 5 seconds. Then darkness for about 10 seconds. This time I brought my spotting scope with me. I zoomed in 60x on the location of the ridge to see if I could find a campfire, headlights, anything. There was nothing in that location all night. If it was people, they weren't using any lights to move the fire or to keep warm, or vehicles to haul massive floodlights around the mountains. The weird part was that this was happening at 2 separate locations miles apart simultaneously. If it were only one location, I would be more convinced humans were doing fun redneck stuff on the weekend. But the coordination or coincidence of this happening identically in the clouds miles apart baffles me, mainly because I've never seen brilliant white light funnels like this before or since. Final thoughts. I'm sorry for the length. Yeah, it was long. I've rewritten this many times over multiple days to make it clear and concise. Thank you for your time. All your pictures, videos I have given for reference are from the day I was referring. I apologize if it's too much information. It comes with the territory of being a nuke worker, haha. I appreciate you as a role model and brave intellect. Thank you for what you do. P.S. I always ready if you're ever in Washington and I want to go camping for a surprise view. Seeing the 4th of July from Mole Hill, simply unreal. God bless you and your family. Well, thank you. I know a little bit about the Olympic Peninsula and the Olympic Mountains. Actually, there were several samples in the DNA study that came out of that area, just outside of Olympic National Park. Lots of strange things there. Lots. Since this is a missing persons video, I won't go into deep detail, but I will tell you that I've climbed over those mountains several times and they are beautiful, dense, and strange. Hey Dave, apologies. I accidentally sent the previous email before it was finished. Long-time villager here, and I've been wanting to tell you the following story for a long time. It's been 8 years since it happened, but my eyes are always looking in the sky. We live in Roseville, a sweet conservative city in the liberal state of California. We are northwest of Sacramento and not far from McClellan Air Force Base. Dad worked in law enforcement, a no-nonsense guy with an easy guy approach to life. He was not prepared for what he witnessed one evening with a neighbor as they chatted in his driveway while the sun was setting. Dad and the neighbor noticed the lights of a plane in the distance approaching from the northwest. It caught their eye because the lights seemed incredibly bright, and as it came closer, they realized the lights were varying in colors of red, orange, yellow, green. His neighbor said that the plane looked as if it was on fire as it came towards them. As it would turn out, the object wasn't a plane at all. Once it was almost over them, they could see that it was disc-shaped with colored lights flashing along the outer edge of the disc. It made no sound. They both stared in shock as the object stopped above them, hovering no more than 100 feet. Woo! That would be fun. It remained there for 15 to 20 seconds and then, without warning or sound, suddenly shot off towards the west at a high rate of speed. Dad said it appeared as it was falling towards the ground and he was expecting an explosion at any moment, but nothing happened. Object vanished from sight, and Dad and the neighbor were left wondering what they'd just seen. Dad called me completely befuddled and confused as he told me what had happened. One would think that a spectacle such as this would not go unnoticed by others, but after scouring the news stations and local websites, it became clear that this event was not witnessed by anyone else. How could that be? I could speculate for hours on this subject, but my thoughts always turned to regret. I wish I'd been there. The world was an amazing place. I've told this story before, but I'll say it again. Little town called Livermore, California. Kind of southeast of San Francisco. Nice city, kind of in the foothills. Several years ago, a family are driving down the freeway going past Livermore, going through it. And there's a reason that they slow traffic or something. And they look to their right as they're going westbound. And over a car dealership right off the freeway, they see this giant UFO just sitting right over this car dealership. The family all saw it, and they're looking around and they're thinking, why isn't everybody pulling over to the side of the road? Why hasn't everyone seen this? This is unbelievable. And nobody is. Traffic clears and boom, everyone takes off. And they kind of think, well, we don't want to sit here alone, so we'll take off. Well, this is before cell phones and things. So like this person, they get home thinking that there's going to be big news all in the paper. Nothing. Nothing reported, nothing talked about, nothing seen. How can that be? Let me explain this the best I can because I can't claim I even understand it. But it's almost as though a UFO can restrict who and what sees them. I've heard of groups of people, and half the group sees the craft, half the group doesn't. So what was the purpose in these people in the cars seeing this craft and nobody else on the highway seeing it? Or nobody in the car dealership seeing it? Right? Yet it happens time after time after time. Strange phenomena, but it happens. It happens a lot. Hey Dave, this incident happened in Jacksonville, Florida. I love all your books and videos, such interesting and bizarre happenings. I'm really looking forward to watching the UFO Connection. I'll do it right now. I think we have 4,000 reviews. It's like a 93 or 94% rating. I'd like to get your opinion on something that happened to me. This was years ago. I wish I remembered exactly when. I found myself in front of a very large window. The only thing out the window were stars. I was leaning back on something at about 20 or 30 degrees. I sensed that there was someone next to me. It was completely black other than the stars. I said out loud, "I wonder where Orion is." The next thing I know, I'm in bed. I would dismiss this as a dream, but when I first opened my eyes, I could see the after image of the outline of the window and the stars. How could a dream have a physical effect on me? I believe I was actually looking out the window. What do you think? Thanks for your time. Any viewers have ideas? That's a good question. It's been a couple times in my life where I've woke up and I had to really think, was that just real, what I dreamed? Or was it a dream? Is that something that happened to me yesterday and I'm just now remembering? Or it's only happened a couple times in life like that to me. But it was so real, it kind of shook me up. Don't know. Next one. Hey Dave, the following is a sighting. This is Great Falls, Montana. About 75 miles from me, 75 miles east over a mountain range. Great Falls had a series of sightings, 60s, 70s. And the sightings were Bigfoot, UFOs. It was a bizarre time. Bizarre time in Great Falls. Anyhow, this is a story. It's a sighting I had while on active duty when I was a member of the Montana Air National Guard in Great Falls. Currently, I'm retired from the Air Force, but did a few years in Montana and New Jersey Air National Guards between my active Air Force periods. My first specialty was security forces, then telecommunications. The sighting was either during the summer of 98 or 99, midday, and either a weekend or holiday since the facility was empty of normal personnel. I was a security forces team member at the time. The Guard unit shares the runway with Great Falls International Airport. We worked with airport police, city police, and air traffic control. It was my shift in the patrol vehicle, and I was parked at the ANG flight line portion looking southwest to the Rockies. I'd noticed a roundish shaped object off in the distance, maybe 10 miles away, where the town of Ulm is. It appeared to be a hot air balloon type of object, relatively low flying. Oh no, not a balloon. I thought some folks were flying a kite or something at first. After 10 or 15 minutes, I noticed that the object was coming my direction, moving fairly slowly and keeping the same height in the air. It would have been moving parallel to I-15, heading from Ulm to Great Falls. Eventually, after 30 minutes or so of watching this, the object came into the ANG area, ANG, and stopped just before the civilian air traffic control tower. It may be at the height that would be twice as that of the tower. Now, we had no binoculars in our truck. I only had a cell phone that could make calls, no picture or video capabilities. And all the F-16s were either in the hangars or shelters for the day. That was prior to the current C-130s that are present. I was more puzzled at the object than worried about malicious actions being attempted. Yeah, I guess I would be too. So it stood still above the tower for roughly 10 minutes, completely still, no drifting of any type. Not that it was windy out, and made no noise nor anything hanging from it. It wasn't round. It had no definite shape or angles to it. If you took a brown paper bag and crumpled it up as if to throw it in the trash, that would be the shape. Same for color, basically a silver, white, gray coloring, no markings on the windows. No markings or windows. The coloring would shift slightly and with different hues, but still be silvery, white, gray, with little grays or any other creatures not visible anywhere. Good. My partner was at the flight control desk, which was at the airport fire station tower at the time. The building was a good stone's throw away from me while I was sitting in the truck. Wow. I could already tell it's going to be an interesting night. I called him on my cell and he came to the window of the room he was in to try and look at the object. There's a slight overhang above the windows in the fire department tower, so either that was blocking his view or he just couldn't see it for whatever reason. He tried calling air traffic control tower, but no one answered, which was normal. The air traffic control tower has a wrap-around deck so you can see folks standing in the windows inside, but no one appeared to take action or have noticed. The object, after 10 minutes or so of sitting still, slowly rose straight up, basically at the same speed as it arrived. It didn't drift or make any other movements, but rose straight until you couldn't see it any longer, and I never have experienced that again. Again, thinking about it, I assumed I wasn't really supposed to see it, and it was cloaked in some manner. Perhaps the odd shape and coloring were sun rays reflected off whatever the object really was. Or some weird weather balloon, I can't say. Anyhow, I've enjoyed your presentations over the years. First hearing of you on Art Bell in the middle of the night in the 90s. We were watching your Bigfoot and now your UFO classes. If you're ever in Great Falls area, my wife and I would be happy to have you at our home in Elm for a visit. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Remember, he said, saw the object, tried to call the people in the control tower, tried to talk to his friend, but they couldn't see it. Remember what I said earlier about certain people can see certain UFOs and other people can't. And I don't think it has to do with anything that's, say, different than you from them. I think it's somehow UFOs can control who can see them, and it's odd. Now, if a balloon went straight up into the air until you couldn't see it anymore, that would not be a balloon. Balloons cannot sit stationary in wind, technically. At least not normal balloons. So, very odd. Good letters. Good stories, you guys. I appreciate it. And the stories now out of North Dakota that I read last week in this story from Malmstrom. Thanks. Again, Malmstrom had a lot of unusual stuff going on in the 60s and 70s, and it sounds like it's still going on in the 90s. So maybe the 2000s, if somebody could talk about it, I'd like to hear it. So the two stories for today. Story number one. I gotta say, when I did the research on this, and a young person disappears, I always think of myself as a dad. In this story, this boy never had a chance in life to be normal. And I directly relate that to the parents. As parents, we got to offer guidance. We got to allow them to understand that there's expectations of them, morally, ethically, school-wise. I'm sorry, that's the way I am as a parent. If I've got to work hard to make a living, I'm going to expect you to work hard to get good grades. You're not going to that school to waste time and to be babysat. You're going to that school to learn, become a smarter person, get good grades. Yes, that's it. And if you're going to school to give the teachers a bad time, that dog don't hunt. And it won't work with me. I never heard from a teacher that my kids were bad kids. So I'm grateful for that. But in this story, this boy never had a chance. I know that if he had been raised by me, he would have had a chance in life. Here's the story. His name was Justin Lee Richardson. Boy, he was only 13 years old. Justin Lee. went missing in the Kaibab National Forest at Grand Canyon, right near Grand Canyon National Park, beginning of July 2001. He was described as really smart, super friendly, and really, really well liked by everybody. He had like a magnetic personality. He lived with his dad in a city called Tucson, Arizona, right outside the southern entrance of Grand Canyon National Park. And his mom lived in Flagstaff. Here's the problem. The problem with everything that related to this story. His dad didn't keep track of Justin. He allowed Justin to come and go as he pleased. There was no guidance, there was no direction, there were no expectations. Sad. This is going to be a sad story for a multitude of reasons. Now, on July 2nd, Justin and 3 friends, aged 18 to 21. Whoa. Dave, didn't you say that Justin was 13? Yeah. Well, what's he doing hanging around with a bunch of kids 18 to 21? That doesn't make any sense. That's correct. It doesn't. And it's wrong. So, 18 to 21, and they traveled to a place called the backside of Moki Lodge, near the southern entrance of Grand Canyon. And they went there to party and maybe to camp and smoke weed and do drugs. Now, this is a very old picture of Moki Lodge. It was closed in 2001. So it was kind of a place to hang out for locals and never get bothered. They were trying to determine what to do with it. They eventually tore it down in 2005, but for many years it was a popular tourist destination. So reports came in that all the boys were smoking weed, maybe doing meth. And somehow or another, when they're out there in this wilderness area, they got separated. And Justin and his friend were out looking for the other 2 and they couldn't find them. So they made their way back to Tucson where they lived to get assistance for the 2 other boys that were missing. Now let me explain this to you. This is Tucson. It's a very small community. Not a lot there. This is Moki Lodge. And this right here is the entrance to Grand Canyon in this Grand Canyon village. Kind of get the idea. So Justin, being a responsible kid, he knows 2 of his friends are missing. He comes back into town with one of his friends, and they get more help for people to go out and search. Next day, they make their way back out there. He and his friend are out there looking, and at 9 o'clock in the morning, his friend says, "Hey, let's just sit down and rest for a minute." And his friend says, at 9 o'clock in the morning, he fell asleep and woke up at 5 p.m. and Justin was gone. It was later said by law enforcement that there's a good chance that the friend that Justin was with was coming down off a meth high and was sleeping all day. Don't know. Don't know if it's true or not. But unbeknownst to Justin and his friend, as they were out there looking, the other 2 were found by employees of the Grand Canyon Railroad, and they were taken back to their homes. So now it was just Justin and his friend out there looking for somebody who wasn't there. Well, Justin's friend wakes up, looks around, and now Justin's not there. His friend said that was weird. They were supposed to be out there looking together, and his buddy didn't realize he had slept 8 hours. It was now 5 o'clock in the afternoon. He gets up and he makes his way back to town. Now, 3 days after Justin disappears, Justin's dad reports him as a missing persons to the Coconino County Sheriff. It's completely absurd. 3 days Justin had been gone. His dad hadn't been keeping track of him. Doesn't sound like he even thought he was gone. How could a child have a chance of living a normal life with guardianship like that, or lack of guardianship? Made me sick. So the Coconino County Sheriff's get involved. And they go out and they start interviewing people, his friends. They determined that this area where Justin was in, he had been there with other friends, partying, having fun 4 other times. And he knew that area really well, and they thought that he could find his way back without a problem. And when his one friend went to sleep, the majority of people thought, well, he must have woke up and just made his way back to town. Or was he doing the reputable thing and maybe went out and still started looking for his friends, which is why he was there in the first place. So the Coconino County Sheriffs get the assistance of the National Park Service, which they were essentially in and on National Park Service property at that time. They get canines and they get helicopters and they start searching. Well, they committed to searching an 8 by 8 square mile area, 64 square miles, for 10 days. 200 ground pounders, people from the community, sheriff's deputies, local sheriff's deputies, National Park Service. They weren't finding anything. Well, the sheriff's office said originally that they thought maybe Justin ran away from home. There was talk that he had a girlfriend in another state and maybe he was going there to visit her. I'm reading this thing. A 13-year-old kid has a girlfriend in another state, I think it was Illinois, and he's going to go travel there on his own to see her. I'm thinking, what kind of la-la land are these parents living in? And it's just the dad. The mom lived in another city. They were divorced. But I'm sure that sheriff's deputies were upset, as I would have been. Well, the original thought was he ran away. Then they thought maybe he was lost. Maybe, we should keep looking. And another sheriff's deputy said that Justin was a super smart kid, magnetic personality, knew his way around the world, was much wiser than his years, and there's no way he got lost. It had to be some kind of crime that took his life. That's what they said. But then they kept going back to this girlfriend in Illinois and that he was going back there to see her. Now, where he got his money, I have no idea. There was never any innuendo that he was dealing drugs. But over the months after this, there were multiple large-scale searches. Cadaver dogs, more helicopters. Nothing. And then since Justin disappeared, which would be 22 years ago, one of the people of that 4 that he was with got murdered. Sheriff's office never said if they had any additional information to point to murder as the cause. But they now believe that they don't think he went to visit his girlfriend because he would have resurfaced by now somewhere, contacting his mom or his dad or his friends. And he's never contacted anybody. Now, Dave, why did you cover this? Well, let's think about that. He was with a friend in the middle of nowhere in the Kaibab National Forest. They were looking for a missing person. His friend falls asleep. Friend wakes up and Justin's gone. Well, I don't care what you call it, that's point of separation. Where'd he go? How did cadaver dogs and canines not pick up a scent? How can professional trackers from the Park Service and the Sheriff's Office not pick up any tracks? That dog don't hunt. I'm sorry. I'm not buying that explanation. I'm not buying any of them, actually. I do find it odd that 18 and 21-year-olds are wanting to hang out with a 13-year-old. Strange. And if I had been the police officer or the detective, I guarantee I would have questioned those boys at length, individually, away from everybody else. Hopefully the detectives did. And then my last conversation would be with the father. And I would say, I have no idea if you feel bad now, because it doesn't even appear as though that you kept track of your son. That doesn't show love and concern. But when your son comes back, you're going to have to explain to Child Protective Services what type of arrangement you have here. Because that type of guidance for a teenager doesn't work. And it will never work. Justin never had a chance in life. It kills me. I was thinking, if he had been born to me, I would have laid expectations on him. Respect, discipline, commitment to a moral cause, and the belief that you are who you associate with. This is something my mom used to hammer into me all the time, because there were some people on our block that weren't really good people. And they were on our block, so I'd talk to them, and we'd play games, play basketball and things, and she'd say, Dave, don't hang around those guys. You know, if other people see you hanging with them, they're going to think you're into the same bad behavior and drugs and things as they are, so don't be around them. You are who you associate with in the eyes of many. So I still feel horrible about Justin. I doubt he will ever be found. I don't know if the other kids have the answers, but there's enough profile points there to make it a very sad case. Now, the next case, quite a different kind of case, but definitely a 411 case. The man's name was Charlie Neal. Charlie was good retired folk living in Mississippi. This is Charlie. Good soul. 67 years old. Went missing October 25th, 1996 in the Panther Swamp National Wildlife Refuge. He was a lifelong resident of Yazoo County, and he actually lived in Yazoo. He'd been hunting since he was 10 years old. And on October 25th, in the early morning hours, he traveled with his good friend out to the Panther Swamp to go squirrel hunting, something he had done hundreds of times. The pair arrived at the parking lot and started to get their hunting clothes on. Well, Charlie was moving a little slow that morning, and his friend got dressed, and Charlie said, "Hey, why don't you just head out? Want to meet back here about lunchtime, and good luck." And his buddy takes off down the trail, just like every other morning of hunting that these two had ever done. Charlie was last seen dressing in the parking lot at 7:30 next to his car. At 11:30, his buddy returns to the parking lot. Charlie's gone. His friend honks the horn, yells, walks down the trail, doesn't see, doesn't hear anything. Nothing unusual in the car. Everything looks exactly how it should have been. Let me lay this out for you. It's a map. This is Jackson, Mississippi. Panther Swamp. This is Yazoo, where Charlie lived. Just a short drive over here to the parking lot of the swamp. And this whole swamp in the Delta National Forest was a great hunting area for squirrels. That's where they like going. One thing I've always said, I have more unusual disappearances around swamps and bogs than anything you can imagine. And this is another one. Well, at about 4:30 in the afternoon, Charlie's friend was going to give up. So he walks a couple miles into a small town, finds a small store, and calls the Yazoo police, county sheriff. Sheriff comes out, and he gets told by his friend that Charlie had hunted this area of the swamp for 50 years. And his buddy couldn't believe he was lost because he knew the area so well. And he also knew that Charlie would always stay on the trails. And just in case, he always carried a compass. So he had his compass and his rifle. And as I've stated before, a rifle is a great thing to have if you're lost. Because if you are lost, you fire the rifle off in 3 rapid succession. 1, 2, 3. Fire them off, and that's the international sign that you need help. Wait another hour, fire 3 more shots. Wait another hour, fire 3 more shots. I always tell people, carry 25 rounds of ammo. Not that you're going to kill 25 things. Safety reasons. Well, Yazoo sheriff gets there. They do a hasty search of the area. Don't find anything. Turn the sirens on. Walk the trails in the immediate area. Don't get anything. The next day, the sheriff had called up the big troops. Mississippi Highway Patrol, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Mississippi Department of Corrections came out with multiple canines, bloodhounds. And then the community came out with 200 ground pounders. And they searched for 7 days. They broke that swamp into different areas and they searched. And the helicopter flew over it with FLIR. They should have found something lighting up that swamp if Charlie was alive. Well, several days after the search got started, the Yazoo County Sheriff wasn't having any leads. They were at a stalemate, per se. So they called his friend in for questioning, and they asked him on the spot. They said, "Hey, would you take a polygraph test?" He said, "Sure." So they gave him a polygraph test, and the sheriff said he passed perfectly. He didn't know anything about Charlie's disappearance. He never tried to harm Charlie. They were lifelong friends. He was deeply saddened. On that same day, November 2nd, Charlie's family was trying to keep interest up in the disappearance and trying to encourage people to keep going out into that area. So they offered a $2,000 reward. And then the next day, Mississippi came out with cadaver dogs because they felt that it had been almost 10 days that nobody believed Charlie could live that long in the wild, that the cadaver dogs could pick up a scent of death. Well, they searched for 2 days, didn't find anything. Nothing. There were multiple times over the following 6 months where family members and friends in the area went back to the swamp. Look for any indication of Charlie. The smell of death. Anything. Nothing. Well, on August 13th, 97, about 10 months after he disappeared, the family needed to do something with Charlie's house, so they petitioned the Superior Court, and they made a determination that Charlie was deceased. They said that no dogs had ever picked up a scent, no tracks were found in the mud, and searchers who testified said they ran out of places to search. They had covered everything imaginable. And then 18 years after Charlie disappeared, there was an interview with family members in a local newspaper. And they said it was the most bizarre set of circumstances they could ever imagine. The area around that swamp had very little traffic. Not many people went to it. It was a place he had gone for decades. Knew it like his own backyard. Never went off trail. And yet, they never found anything related to Charlie anywhere in that swamp. And after 19 years, they thought that they would have found something. And they didn't. So, let's think about this for a second. Profile points. The biggest one to me that stood out right away was point of separation. Now, normally, Charlie and his friend would go out there together, maybe walk the trail 100 yards apart, but they'd always be in somewhat close proximity. But today, Charlie said, "No, go ahead and I'll catch up." He never did. Point of separation. Number 2, obviously around water. Number 3, as I told you before, swamps. Swamps and bogs. I can't explain it. Lots of weird things go on there. Number 4, hunting, a subgroup in and of themselves. 5, dogs couldn't pick up their scent. Multiple prison dogs, bloodhounds, that were known to be outstanding tracking dogs, couldn't pick up anything. And the last one, cadaver dogs. Cadaver dogs can pick up the smell of death miles and miles away. So if Charlie was anywhere in that swamp, they would have found him. How could that be? When I read the article years and years after this case with his family, they were still pained. Pained because Charlie was a good, retired soul. Just trying to live a life. Trying to find a little enjoyment in a day-to-day with a friend, going out hunting. And he disappears and is never found? You know, I want you to understand this. Even though I talk about hundreds of cases every year, I never get used to it. Something in my heart bothers me about these cases, always. I'll talk to you about Justin. I mean, it's just absolute crap the way his dad treated him. But then Charlie. You think that we deserve a better outcome in life than disappearing and not being around our kids and family at the end of life? I really wish I understood what was happening here. But friends, I appreciate you being here. And if you like the videos, give me a thumbs up. Please share them on your social media. And I say that all the time, but I really wish that you would. You know that you can watch our movie on Amazon, Vimeo, and iTunes. If you want the DVD or the Blu Ray, you can buy them right from me at NA, like in North America, nabigfootsearch.com. Go to nabigfootsearch.com and go to the store, and you can find our posters, books. Don't buy our books on Amazon. You're going to get ripped off. They'll charge you $50 to $150 for what I'm charging you $25. And lastly, always, I say this at the end, do something nice for somebody. We need to do things for our community members that are in need of help. And if we're halfway healthy, we can help. Volunteer your time, and we all have a little time to volunteer. Be nice to your family, love your family, Paulides out.